on that note, we will dive right into to our plans for today. So we've done the intros. We'll do a little bit of review, and then we have a bunch of slides, and we've broken it down into how you want to propagate different types of plants. There's some overarching sort of general rules, and then some specifics depending on the type of plant. And of course, we always have our special promo for the folks joining us here today, and an opportunity to ask questions. So I have my wonderful facilitator, Kat, here, my moderator, and she'll be watching the chat. So if you do have questions at any point, put your question down in the chat. Kat may be able to direct you initially, or provide some additional resources. And it also is a placeholder so that when we get to the end of the session, you can be sure that your question is going to be addressed. So we already did our intro. So thank you, the two of you, Maxine and Jesse, for saying hello. And for anyone that is new this week, I always like to start with a really, really high level recap of what in particular is special about Jocelyn's Growing Group, or about Jocelyn's Soil Booster, the brand of all natural soil and plant food products that we create here at Waste Not Farms. And it is all about the microbes. So the products that we produce, and in fact, the tips and the tricks and the education we provide, is really centered around this idea that it's the microbiology in soil that creates healthy, thriving, living plants. And that we want to work with Mother Nature, with these microbes, rather than against them, which is the case when we're using chemicals or conventional agriculture or conventional growing techniques. So these sessions are all about regenerative growing, which is at a high level about improving the quality of the soil, improving the overall ecosystem year in, year out, season in, season out, as we're cultivating, whether it's food crops or whether it's ornamental plants. The idea behind regeneration and working with microbes is that over time, we're in fact strengthening the quality and the resilience of that ecosystem. And the reason that's ultimately important is because microbes are responsible for feeding plants. They are like the Uber Eats delivery of the soil, and the plants and the microbes have a language by which they communicate with each other. And the plant will put out exudates, which are types of glucose molecules that ask for specific nutrients based on whatever that plant needs at that time. The microbes, they go out much farther than the roots could ever reach. They find those nutrients, or they manufacture them, and then they bring them back to the plant and hand them over in exchange for another glucose molecule, which is like a tip or a reward, and in fact allows the microbiology population to grow and reproduce and grow stronger, which in turn also allows the plant to grow and grow stronger as well. So it is a positive feedback cycle. As they work together, they both become healthier. It's a synergistic relationship, like so many relationships in Mother Nature. And ultimately, the microbes are transferring not only nutrients, but communication signals through the soil, which is really critical. And that's how plants are able to talk to each other. And it really is like a community down there. They work together, and as scientists, we're really only just beginning to understand how sophisticated they are under the soil, and in fact on the plant as well. So today in particular, we're talking about propagation, because this is a really exciting way to grow new plants without having to purchase them. And that's awesome for regenerative techniques, because it does mean that you can stay away from, for example, plants that have been raised with chemicals, or you can stay away from buying new potted plants that have a lot of peat in their potting soil, which we talked about last time. We want to keep our peat bogs intact because they're very valuable ecosystems. So by propagating your own plants, your own food, it does give you much more control and an ability to really follow regenerative principles to the best of your ability. Not to mention, it's way cheaper than having to buy plants. So there's a lot of good reasons, and it's fun because it does generally happen very quickly because you're not starting from seed. There's already you're usually using an existing piece of a plant, so there isn't as much lag time. You're not waiting as long, and ultimately you can then make lots and lots of little baby plants, and for example, give them to your friends or use them as gifts. So the first thing to appreciate is that when we propagate a plant, we are essentially making a clone. So the new plant that we grow is genetically identical to the old plant. And the reason, for some reasons, this is a positive. If you have a type of plant that is doing really, really well in a particular environment, so you've been really happy with the growth of a particular type of carrot in your garden and your soil, then certainly you'd want to propagate that particular carrot type so you can continue to have that success. The downside to this is that it does ultimately put a limit on how often or how many times you can propagate that particular plant. And so it's important to appreciate that all living organisms, when they reproduce their cells, which living organisms are constantly turning over their cells. I believe that as humans, we're turning over our cells, I think it's once a day almost. That every time we do that, the cell is in fact making a duplicate genetic copy of our DNA helix, and the same goes for plants. And the downside to that is that every time that duplication occurs, the potential for errors to be inserted into that DNA code increases. So that's why as we get older, as humans, we tend to have more ailments, more illnesses, and that's a direct result of the fact that simply out of for statistical purposes, sooner or later, all those replications, there are going to be errors that start to add up and cause us problems. So the same can happen with your plant. So you wouldn't want to propagate a new jade plant and then propagate from that jade plant again, and then propagate again from that jade plant again, because each time you're doing that, you're carrying over all those mistranslated DNA sequences that inherently occur. So after a few copies, you do want to go back to the initial mother plant or purchase a new plant entirely so that you're not creating additional problems for yourself. There's two main ways that you can propagate. One is cuttings and the other is division. And so we're going to be looking at both of those. You may recall from our a few sessions ago, we talked about plant growth hormones. And I simply wanted to loop back onto this piece here for a few reasons, because they are important for propagation. This is ultimately the auxins is a natural type of plant growth hormone or plant growth stimulator. And this is what encourages root growth versus cytokines, which encourage branching or new stem growth. So in our particular scenario, we do want to ensure that there's plenty of both of those hormones in the soil or accessible to the plant to speed up the process of propagation. So of course, the worm manure, which we're going to be talking about a little bit as one option, is great because it has these hormones inherently in that product. So the first thing to appreciate is that it is important to take the cuttings in the correct location. And this does influence how strongly the auxins are able to represent themselves and then trigger root growth. So you do, when you are taking a cutting, so you're let's say you've got your basil here in the bottom, you do want to make sure that you are cutting just below the node. So the node is where leaves would branch out, or potentially even additional stems would branch out from the main stem. And you want to cut just below that node, because that is where there is that highest concentration of the particular plant cells that are going to allow that plant to propagate and generate those growth hormones. Make sure, remember, of course, we want to be cutting on an angle, a 45-degree angle, and always when we're trimming or taking cuttings, we want to be using a clean pair of trimmers or scissors, because again, we are effectively creating an open wound in the plant, and we wouldn't want any residual pathogens, for example, to be able to infect that particular plant because it was carried over from a dirty pair of scissors or whatnot. So you can see here that you want to make sure you're cutting right below where there's some branching of the stems. So if we look at herbs first, because herbs are so popular, they're really quite a relatively easy plant. Depending on your taste, there's lots of different options. They can grow in the windowsill, and most of them are relatively easy to propagate. So the first thing you do want to do is to take quite a good sized cutting from an herb, and that's in part because we know that herbs can grow very quickly. We don't have to be as concerned that we're taking too much away from the plant, and of course, we're doing that cutting below the node. We want to remove the lower leaves, not all of the leaves, but at least a couple inches worth of leaves, so that they are not sitting in the water. Because what we're going to do with this cutting is we're going to actually just sit it in some water. Now, this isn't here, but I'm remembering now, this is a really critical point, which is that if you are on city or municipal water, always remember that that water, in fact, has chlorine and chloramine in it. And those are, in fact, they're basically toxic chemicals. We don't have to get into why they're in our water. Obviously, there's a belief that they're doing some benefit for us humans. However, they are essentially, they can damage microbial life. In fact, they do. So what you would want to do in this case is, if you have municipal water and you don't have other options, you can fill up your glass or fill up a jug and then leave it out sitting for about 24 hours. And that is in fact going to allow that chlorine and chloramine to evaporate and dissipate. And after about a day, you can be confident that there aren't particularly high levels of either of those chemicals in the water, so you're safe to use it. In this case, we're going to place the cutting in the water. We don't want to submerge the whole thing, but we do want to make sure that the bottom couple inches, I'd say 2 inches, are in that water. And then we want to leave it on a sunny windowsill, because of course the plant does need to photosynthesize to be able to start growing some new roots, right? The photosynthesis is the process by which it draws carbon dioxide out of the air, and then using the original solar power, it transforms that carbon into glucose molecules, which ultimately power the growth of the plant and also powers the communication with the microbial life in the soil. So make sure whenever you're propagating that either you have a very sunny south-facing window, or of course you can always use grow lights to supplement less than adequate lighting. After a number of days, you will start to see the water go cloudy, and this is an indication that you do want to change the water. So, there's some microbial life growing in there, but it's really not the right kind. So make sure every few days that you are switching out the water for clear water. And then, believe it or not, after about a week, maybe a little bit longer, the roots will start to grow out of the bottom of that cutting. So you're going to in fact be watching. So it is important to use a clear container. You want to be watching for those roots to grow, and that's your cue to then transplant that cutting into some soil and some worm manure. And again, we want to have that worm manure in there, both because it's going to provide additional plant hormones that are going to indicate that it's time to start proliferating and start growing your root system, start growing additional stems. And as well, it's going to have all that microbial life that's going to reduce transplant shock. So remember again that this is a difficult process for the plant to be going through. It is getting stressed out through the process. So we want to have that diversity of microbial life in the soil, which will immediately provide on-demand nutrients based on whatever SOS signal that plant puts out. It's going to need some help repairing itself and getting back to where it wants to be in its ecosystem, and ultimately it's the microbes that can help it do that. So we heard before that that Maxine had split her shamrocks, and so she was able to propagate that plant through division, which is a really nice way to be able to take a crowded planter or a crowded container, and really essentially what you're doing is breaking apart that plant into two or sometimes even three or four, and then repotting them in their own containers. So the first step in this case, similar to as when you are repotting, is that you want to carefully turn the plant to its side and pull the plant out of the pot, and then wipe away all the soil to be able to expose its roots. Again, we want to be very gentle. We don't want to roughen or really damage the root system in any way. So, I always sort of liken it to untangling a knot you have in your hair. You want to do it very gently. And then you can split the root ball, which is the name for that mass or that clump of roots, and you can split it apart. And how you do this is a little bit dependent on the type of plant. Sometimes the plant can very easily split apart with very little force, and you can almost see it as you're cleaning off the soil that it inherently has sort of divided itself in the pot, and with just a little bit of extra leverage, you can pull those two pieces apart. However, sometimes that's not the case, and they're really, really tightly woven in which case you would want to have some kind of a tool. A hori knife would probably be my choice, which is sort of like a trowel, but that has a very sharp serrated blade. A serrated blade is useful in this case because as we know, some of those roots can be very tough and thick, and using a serrated blade is going to help make a clean cut. What we don't want to do is be using a dull blade that really reams on those roots and ultimately creates a less clean cut. We're really trying to make a clean cut, and you can also do that in such a way so as to decide how much of the above ground foliage or leaf mass is going to be associated with every individual root ball that you're creating. At that point, you can then essentially repot it as you would any other plant. Of course, the suggestion would be to be including worm manure. And I should mention that especially in this case, where you're going to be having digging a hole and then placing your divided herb or plant in that hole and then filling in around it, the worm manure is really most effective when it goes into the hole first, and then the plant is dropped on, or the root ball is dropped on top. And the reason for this is that, again, those microbes that are in the worm manure are really wanting to work closely with the root systems. They get their instruction and they also get their food from the exudates that are released through the roots. And so by putting that worm manure right in the hole, right in contact with the root system, it is going to be able to activate and provide nutrients to those plants pretty much from the get-go. This would be in contrast to, let's say, a plant that you're fertilizing with the worm manure, but you can only sprinkle it on top, in which case you have to water well and allow those microbes to move through the soil horizon until they arrive at the root zone. So across the board, whenever you can put a microbial plant food like our worm manure into the hole first to be in contact directly with the roots, it's going to work that much faster and that much better. Okay, so next type of plant for us to look at are these wonderful plants. I know all of us have some of these because they're very easy and forgiving plants to have. And we're talking about types of plants like spider, snake plants, and aloe vera plants. So these are a particular type of plant that, in fact, is very vocal, let's say, about when it wants to propagate. And it actually takes the initiative itself to decide that it's going to put out baby plants. And these little baby plants are called pups. And a pup, when a plant like this puts out a pup, it is trying to tell you something, which is that its ability to grow further within the existing container is limited, and that therefore, in order to reproduce, which plants are ultimately always trying to reproduce because that's what ensures survival of their genetic code, they're going to put off this pup, which in nature would allow that pup to hopefully find a separate patch of soil, which it would then ultimately essentially move itself into and then grow out from there. So I have a plant here that has a pup, in case none of you have seen it. So this is a type of spider plant here, and I wanted to show you what this looks like. So pups usually end up coming off the side of a plant and growing off of a very long vine. So you can see here, it's a bit tangled up, but untangle my naughty hair. And so you can see this is the vine that has produced pups. And so hopefully you guys can see, so that little clump that you see there, right there, is a pup. And then there was another little pup there. And then there's two little pups there at the bottom. So we could in fact make 4 new pup plants from that spider plant. And again, what you can do there is either cut off the pup, or in fact, sometimes you can just gently break it off with your fingernail, which I did there. So there's our little pup, and that's the little root node right there that we want to place in our, well, in this case, we're going to let this dry first. So there are some types of plants where after you take your cutting or your pup here, you are going to want to let it dry out. And this is in part because if it's too wet, then there is a chance that there's going to be fungal growth, or that a pathogen could get there and it may start to rot. So that is always a concern when we're propagating. And in some cases, like with these snake plants, with the succulents we're going to see next, you do in fact want to give the pup a day or two to dry out before then placing it in the new soil and allowing it to grow from there. So so in this case, again, what you would do is, I've had success with placing pups and literally just lying them on a small bowl of worm manure and just leaving it there. And you don't in fact even have to plant it, because if you think about it, in nature, this pup would not plant itself to reproduce. It would simply hang down off the vine. It would keep coming down until it hit the ground and hit the soil, and then it would rest on the soil And after a number of days and weeks, it would start to root out into that soil and then grow itself out from there. So ultimately, that's what we want to replicate, sort of following Mother Nature's best practices. And certainly, if we're doing that on the worm manure, we have the added benefit of the microbial life and the plant hormones. So propagating succulents is very similar. We do want to use a little stem cutting, or we can use an individual leaf. So I have my jade plant here because I'm very proud of it. This was something that we started through propagation. It's probably been almost, I don't know, 2 years. For those of you who know jade plants, they do grow incredibly slowly. But it was a really exciting experiment in the early days where we and so what we would do in this case with our succulent is, again, we would pick a leaf or a cutting. And again, what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to gently pop it off like that. And this is the type, again, where we want to let this dry out. We want to let this little jade leaf dry out for a couple of days, and it is going to crust over, which again is important because this is essentially an open wound to the plant, and we don't want any pathogens getting in there. So once we've allowed that to dry out for a couple of days, we can rest it. Again, we're just going to place it on top of the soil. You can't really see that, can you? And then leave it in the sun or in a sunny window. And we're going to keep that soil moist, but not wet. And again, that's important because if it is too wet, it's going to potentially rot. And again, jade are slow growers, so keep in mind generally how quickly that plant grows, because it's going to take a while for a slow plant to propagate, whereas a faster growing plant is going to propagate more quickly. So with jade, you're looking at, anywhere from a month to 6 weeks, and you'll start to see the little roots coming out. If it's in the pot that you'd like to keep it in, you just let it do its thing and keep going. Or at that point, you can very carefully pull it out with the roots intact, and then plant it, cover the roots in a little bit of soil or manure, and in whatever new planter you would like that plant to grow into. Okay, propagating veggies. I wanted to include this in here because it's a really fun one, and we're all struggling with the price of groceries these days. So it turns out you can actually grow your own groceries at home. You do have to be a little bit patient, and you do need some quality soil and sunlight. But it certainly is possible, and it's a lot of fun and rewarding, and especially if you have kids, they love to watch this happen. So most types of root veggies will in fact propagate this way. We heard about the horseradish from Jesse, carrots, a lot of the root veg that have that strong tap root. You just need to keep the top. So you'd have the top of your carrot or the top of your horseradish. And I've seen different ways to do this. Often they do recommend that you let it sit in water for a number of days until you start seeing that growth. And then you can transplant it into soil. And from there, it's going to really take off. I have seen people do this by directly planting it in the soil. In fact, I've done it successfully. However, generally, you're going to find the recommendation that you use water first. Water is effectively the elixir of life. There's a reason why it is so critical to living organisms. We're, of course, mostly made up of water, and it has so many valuable, important properties. And the fact that plants can effectively regrow themselves in only water definitely speaks to the value of healthy, clean water for plants and for ourselves as well. So this is a cool a little experiment, if you will, to do, and it works really well when you have these fresh veggies that you're trying to regrow. Okay, so a few tips for propagation before we get to some Q&A. And certainly there's a few different reasons you want to propagate. We heard earlier that the shamrocks were growing out of the container for Maxine, so she knew it was time to give them more space. So she was able to pull those apart and create a couple of new plants. The same goes if the plant is dying. So if there's significant piece of the plant that looks diseased or has already died, you can often still take a cutting of any of the living parts, or if in fact you just sort of wholesale clear cut the entire top of the plant, but leaving the root ball, if there is some healthy roots, then there is a good chance that with the right healthy soil, healthy microbes, and some plant growth hormones, that plant will actually be able to fully regenerate and come back to life healthy. So those are both, particularly good reasons. Important to note that when you are propagating through any of these methods, that your success rate is not going to be 100%. And so don't be discouraged if you try one and it doesn't work. There's a variety of reasons why that might be the case. Of course, make sure you're following the best practices in terms of cutting below the root node, not using water that would have chlorine or chloramine in it, making sure there's enough light. However, even when you do all the right things, it's not a perfect guaranteed system. So in that case, what we'd always suggest is if you're really desperate to propagate a plant, make sure that you do take a few cuttings, and that way you're going to greatly increase the likelihood of at least one of them taking and being successful. Something I feel really, really strongly about and wanted to make sure I mention is that I strongly recommend that you stay away from any kind of store-bought or chemical rooting hormones. So I learned this after I'd actually purchased some of this rooting hormone myself, and only to open it up and read on the label that it was in fact a cancer-causing agent. And of course, as soon as I read that, it made perfect sense. I mean, the point of these chemicals, even the natural rooting hormones, the reason why they're being sold and why they're so powerful is because they stimulate cell reproduction. And I'm sure most of us appreciate that the problem with cancer is out of control cell reproduction. So please stay away from any kind of chemical that you would purchase for propagation, for rooting. It's just not worth it to have this kind of thing in your home, as far as I'm concerned. However, there are natural alternatives, and just this past weekend, actually, I was chatting with someone who shared this with me. So I haven't tried this yet myself, although I am eager. But I did do some research, and it's sound science. And so what this gentleman suggested to me is that he does his propagation and rolls the cutting, the wound or the base of the cutting, in raw honey. Or dips it in raw honey and then rolls it in cinnamon. And what's important here is that both of these ingredients are antimicrobial, antifungal agents. And so what's happening here is that you're allowing, or you're essentially providing extra protection to your cutting in an effort to prevent any kind of root rot or pathogen from getting into that open wound. So this is a very cool technique. I'm looking forward to trying it myself. Important to note that you need to use non-pasteurized honey. And that's because when they do pasteurize honey, it's a high heat process, and they're killing some of the natural antimicrobial properties of that product. So, so do make sure that you're using a product that hasn't gone through the pasteurization process. Okay, so we're ahead of schedule here, which pretty much never happens. So we have lots of time to take questions. The homework for those of you folks who are following along at home would be to take a look at your plant collection, your plant family, and try and figure out where you want to have plant babies. It's time to do your planned parenthood, planned plant parenthood. There you got it. And you're going to, I would love to hear that some of you guys have tried some of these techniques, especially if you're able to try the honey and cinnamon. I want you to hear your report back, and also make sure you're using the right type of propagation technique for that project. Just before we get to the questions, I do, of course, want to give you guys the opportunity. We've got a really great deal on today. Of course, I've been talking about the worm manure and all the diverse microbial life and the natural plant growth regulators or plant growth hormones that are in this product, and that it is really going to help and speed up the process of propagation. So we have offered this product for $5 off. And you're going to get free shipping with that. So if you've been waiting to try and you're want to figure out if all the hype is real, then today's promo would be an awesome opportunity. You're going to be looking at about $25 all day. That's going to get shipped to you, and within about a week you'll have the worm manure, and you'll be able to do your propagating. And of course, all your other plants are going to love it as well. Okay, so I think that's it. If you haven't signed up for our newsletter, do make sure head over to soilbooster.ca, and we have another newsletter coming out this weekend. And there's always lots of great info in there, and events and tips and tricks for regenerative growing without chemicals. Next week we're going to be talking about container gardening. We're getting close now. May 24 is within reach. We can all sense it. It's coming like a week earlier this year too. So we want to really be looking at getting ready to set up our outdoor containers, and then also rejuvenating any of our indoor containers that we want to that maybe need a little bit of plant care. And as always, if you have questions, feel free to reach out. So with that in mind, Kat, maybe I can turn it over to you and we can look at some of the questions.
Sure. So we have Ginny just commented that she did rosemary and it worked really well. And then someone else asked if they could propagate rosemary. And yes, I've done it myself as well, which worked. Oh, look, Ginny's showing it. Oh, great. Oh, Ginny, if you want to unmute yourself. Oh, you're still muted, Ginny.
Okay, so like you said, Jocelyn, thanks for the tip. I was never very good at the node thing, but I got it now. But you can, I don't know if you can see just that little white there. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's some more on this one. That took about 2 weeks. And then, so last year I did, and then I made these babies, but see how it got through the winter, but I really think the soil was half your soil and half the ProMix. And for those of you listening, if you it's worth it to invest in the peatless soil, but I didn't have enough, and also it's expensive. So my first step towards helping this problem was to at least commit to half.
Great.
And I grow a lot of plants, so that was indeed an expense, but at least do something. Don't do nothing. But I think if I had a little more worm manure, I wouldn't be getting this. Like, it's at the end of the season and it wants food, eh?
Yeah, it does look like it's struggling a little bit, so it probably needs a bit of a boost. I mean, it probably, have you had grow lights on it or just in the window?
This is on my southwest window. And so it was propagated from a little thing like this last, probably October, because I have a big mama that I grow from.
Nice, nice. Yeah,
My,
so oh yeah, keep going.
my other question is about the drying out. So I didn't dry those out. I put them right into the soil. Would you dry out like the rosemary roots like that? Or is that for like babies, like the puppies?
Yeah, so it's more so for plants that are more like cactus or succulents that really want
Gotcha.
a dry that are more susceptible to root rot.
Okay.
So that's sort of the differentiator there.
Okay. And then these are, I'm also a big native plant grower. So if anybody wants to go like David Suzuki, Butterfly Way, they'll tell you all about the native plants. And I integrate natives with vegetables. And there's my osier dogwood from cuttings just, what, about 3 weeks, ladies. And I'll have
Oh
like,
wow.
there are lots and lots of roots. And I tried some right in your soil. They're in the garage. So we'll have to wait another 2 weeks. I'll let you know.
Oh
But
cool, cool. Yeah.
really, really fun. And so cutting on the diagonal right below the node, I didn't know that before. So that improved my propagation this year on that. That's great. Thank you. Okay.
Now, Ginny, are you going to swap out that water? Because it's starting to look a little yellow.
It is yellow. I guess I should do that. I have a lot of babies in my house, including on my sourdough. And then I have these guys too. So if you're doing, I'm doing pea sprouts, everything. Again, ladies, a little bit of Jocelyn soil goes a long way. So I guess I better get at it, eh? Off the call, get to choose that water. And should I do it gently? I was worried that
Yes.
the furry roots would not like a lot of jostling. So what do you think about that?
Yeah. Oh, you don't always want to be very gentle as possible. And so yeah, definitely do that carefully. But then also keep in mind that we don't want to baby our plants too much. I was at the Cannabis Expo last weekend, and I was talking to other growers about this on a panel. And in nature, our plants do get a little bit weather worn, right? They get beat up by the wind. The rain it can be harsh and hard, hail even. And that ultimately that actually creates a stronger root system. So for example, that's why when we start our seedlings, we always want to have a fan, because that little bit of movement ultimately encourages the plants to put out more roots. So you do want to be delicate and careful and aware, but also appreciate that the plant needs a little bit of toughening up, let's say.
Okay,
Thank you so much, Ginny. You've been such a big supporter of everything that we do here. I swear that Ginny is not getting paid. She does pay for all her products, and although it does sound like she should be our one of our ambassadors. So that's great. Thanks for that show and tell, Judy. That was really nice.
Thanks, Ginny. So we have another question from Colleen. What is the best way to propagate romaine lettuce?
So the best way to propagate romaine lettuce would be just like hopefully you saw the veggie slide. So you do want to leave about 2 inches of base, or what would be the right term for that? The bottom of the romaine. Oh my gosh, does Ginny have another example? Gosh, she's useful today, isn't she?
I'll show you the mistake. So see, Jocelyn, I cut that one too short.
Mm.
And that one was long enough. That's what you're talking about, right?
That's right. So you do want to leave a stem. It looks like actually about 3 inches is a better choice. And then sit that in water until you start seeing the roots coming out. And so over time, that romaine will then grow up and out into a brand new head. Keep in mind, it will take a while. So as soon as you start to see that growth, getting it into some real soil is going to speed up that process. And of course, making sure that's healthy living soil is going to be even better, create more nutrient density in that lettuce. And so that's going to be your best bet. And then also remember, of course, that lettuce and leafy greens, almost all types, are in fact cool weather crops. So as our season gets warmer, you do want to keep that in mind. It shouldn't be getting too hot, because that's going to stunt the growth of the romaine as well. So thank you for that question, Colleen.
Great. Then we have another question from Janice. Could cinnamon and honey be added to water that plant cuttings are being rooted in?
Could cinnamon and water be added to the water? I don't see why not. Although I wonder if over time, what might happen is that those microbes, so keep in mind that all the microbes in soil are in fact waterborne organisms. They are living in the watery film that covers and surrounds all the mineral and organic matter in soil. And so in this case, my only concern would be that if you mix it into the water, the microbes may come alive, and then over time, because they're not getting fed, and there's also a concern about oxygen level, that they may die off. So I really can't say for certain, but it would be worth experimenting with. And like I said, I'm gonna try that. So Kat, why don't we add that one to our list as well, in terms of things we'd like to try out.
Yep, that'd be a fun one. I have seen examples of it only being added, like you dip the tip of the stem of a cutting into honey, and then you plant it into soil right away. So it doesn't typically get washed off from the water.
Gotcha. Yeah.
But yeah,
I think
we can try it.
You might lose some of the benefits by adding it to the water.
And then Romana has a few aloe vera questions. So
Hi, thanks. Okay, I'm gonna try. I don't know if I know how to flip my phone over. Second, let's see. Okay, I don't think I can flip it. So I'm gonna try to show. So I'm sort of squatting. I have 4 aloe vera plants. I don't know if you can see.
Yep.
Okay, so that one I think is doing fine. The one right beside it, you see that one?
Yep, we can see the bigger one.
Okay, so that one I got sort of, I picked up from like a free cycle website thing or Facebook page group. But I didn't realize when I said, oh, I'll take it, that it was so large. So like physically, I had a hard time carrying the thing. And so some of the leaves had fallen off. And then I don't know if you can see in the stem, like it's growing really long, but like the growth is more up here, right?
Right.
So I was just wondering, what can I do? Like I tried to see if I could, like, can I plant it lower? Or I wasn't sure because it's like looking lovely up here, but like not great down the stem.
Yeah. So I mean, I think you're actually doing pretty well, especially for a free cycled plant that you pulled off the curb. And kudos for you for saving a plant's life. So the growth off the top looks really healthy, really vibrant. So I think the plant itself is actually quite healthy. It's not unusual for the bottom leaves of the aloe vera to go brown. And I would, if we look back at that again, one factor which contributing to might be the fact that those leaves at the bottom were in fact shielded from sunlight and may effectively gone dead because of how deep they are in that plant, in that potter. So, aloe vera is a desert plant. It needs a lot of sunlight. And so my guess would be that those bottom leaves just weren't getting what they needed. The good news is you can easily trim them off. And then in this case, you could certainly add a significant amount of soil up until where the green growth starts. So I wouldn't want to cover any of the green growth itself, but that it's almost like the root of the aloe vera has been exposed. And certainly once you cut off those bottom brown leaves, it's going to be even more exposed. So you could simply fill that in, and then I believe you're going to be in good shape.
Okay, so just to make sure that I understand, so should I, because right now there's like a few big long leaves, like should I just sort of trim down these ones and then plant it deeper or put more soil in or get a bigger pot, whatever, and then it would be okay. But like I was just worried if I cut these off, do I have to wait for it to scab over? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, so I would definitely cut the ones that are brown and crinkled. But ideally you're going to leave any of the living ones. Now, aloe vera has the special property, we perhaps most of us know that it is useful as a topical natural application for skin issues. So and when you do that, you do actually sort of break the leaf off near the stem of the plant or the base of the plant. However, you are in fact creating an open wound in that case, so you really don't want to do that unless you really need to or have to. So in this particular case, I would suggest leaving any of the green growth as is. Any of the brown, snip off as close to the stem as you can, and then bring the height of the soil up to just below where the green growth starts growing.
And the worm castings, since I can't really put it in exactly where the root is, it's okay just to mix it in with the new soil that I'm topping up.
Yeah, for sure. And I know I heard we had a delay with our delivery. I know you were with the giveaway winner a couple weeks ago. Sorry, I guess the shipper got lost, but Kat's getting that sorted out for you. And by all means, so you could do two things. Like the nice thing with the worm manure, there's no such thing as too much. It's never going to like harm or damage your plant. So if you were looking for a quick, easy solution, you could just literally dump the bag or half the bag in up to the right height. But you could also extend the life of that by mixing it in with a soil. You're looking at anywhere from about 10 to 30% worm manure by volume ratio into that soil, and then using that to fill in the planter.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you. I'm loving all these like show and tells today. This is great. This is really great.
Oh, I can just show you super quick, super, because I know the people are waiting. I just transplanted, or I had gotten the so I have 4 roses here. I had gotten the bare root roses, and it's been
Cool.
just starting to. I'm gonna pop them into a sunny spot in the house, but I was doing that. Now I'll be quiet.
I remember you asking last time about roses, so I'm glad you found some there that you got going. And yeah, make sure you bring those in because they won't be too happy outside right now, but they'll love the worm manure as well. So good. I'm excited to follow your progress this season.
Awesome, great work. And then we have just one more question. How many pups should you have in a pot?
Oh, how many pots should you put into a fresh pot? Well, I mean, it does depend on large part how big that pot is. So in this case, I would really, it does depend ultimately, and also how quickly that plant's going to grow. So for example, with the jade, which is so slow, you're probably safe to put a couple pops even into a smaller container because the speed at which they're going to grow is very slow. But something like a snake plant or spider plant, which is much more quick to take off, then you really probably only want 1 pup in every container. Otherwise, if you have more and they are all successful, you're going to end up doing more repotting shortly. So that would be my recommendation there. And we didn't draw for the we haven't given a giveaway. Kat, is there someone in particular you think that that should get the, what, I really loved Jessie's introduction around, and that she's doing the horseradish. Is she still here?
Yeah.
Okay, Jessie, you're the winner this week of the bag of worm manure. So congratulations. Thanks for speaking up at the start and talking about all your ginger and turmeric and horseradish. It was a great segue. And you can send Kat your address. You can private DM her if you'd like, and then we'll get that shipped out to you this week. So thank you, everyone. It's 1 o'clock. We'll sign off here, and appreciate everyone doing their show and tell, and looking forward to more on that next week. We'll see you then.